Assalamualaikum and hi everyone. Let's continue with the fourth part of this topic on how we can control the loop from true to false using different ways. In any of the repetition structure that we have learned, such as while, do while, and for loop, they can be controlled by counter control loop, sentinel control loop, and flag control loop. We will look at each of these, what they meant, and how to use them. Counter control loop is when we know exactly how many times a set of statements need to be executed. Most of the examples that we have seen in this topic use counter control loop. The general form is we would write the condition as counter less than n. It can be in while loop, do while loop, and also in for loop. A simple example is when we have a variable called num and we initialize it to 1. We say that while num is less than 10, it will execute the two statements within the while loop. We know exactly how many times we want the statements to be executed. So it will repeatedly do system.out.print and print out the value of num, then increment the variable by 2 at each iteration. Since we do the increment by 2, it will repeat the statements 5 times before the condition becomes false. The output from this program is 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. Sentinel control loop is the use of special value that is input by the user when we do not know how many times a set of statements need to be executed. It all depends on the user how many times they want the statements to be repeated. Sentinel value means the value is not part of the input to be processed. The general form of it is variable not equal to sentinel value. We can use different equality operators such as equal to, larger than, or smaller than. Same as before, it can be used in while, do while, and for loop. Let's look at this example. In this program, the while loop will be repeated unless the user enters the choice value other than 1. The sentinel value is equal to 1. If you run this code, it will display press 1 if you want to continue. Then we enter 1, it saves the value in the variable called choice. It enters the while loop and the condition is true because 1 is equal to 1. It then displays inside looping. Press 1 if you want to continue. If we enter 1, it will repeat the same statements. If we enter 0, it checks the condition and 0 is not equal to 1 and it then exits the while loop. It will display outside looping. We can have other conditions such as choice larger than 0, meaning that the loop will only end if the user enters negative numbers. Or we can do while choice not equal to 0, where we define that 0 means exits. We can use any values that we want as the sentinel value. How should we modify this code if we want to use for loop instead of while loop? Remember that for loop, there are 3 parts of it. The first one is the initial value, the second one is the condition, and the third one is for the update. If we write for, semicolon, choice equal to 1, semicolon, is this valid? This is valid because in for loop, we don't exactly need to have all 3 parts if we don't need them as shown in this example. If we run this code, this will give us the same output as what we would get when we use while loop, given that the user enters the same number. Flag control loop is when we use Boolean variable to control the loop, meaning that the value of true and false instead of using logical operators values. For example, we declare a variable called found of type Boolean, then initialize it to false. In the while loop, the condition that we wrote is while not found. This means the loop will repeat until found becomes true. We can rewrite not found as while found not equal to true or while found equal to false. Remember that in the loop, we need to have some statement that make the condition becomes false. Otherwise, we will get an infinite loop. For example, over here, we use if. and then if the condition is true for the expression, found will then be changed to true. To summarize, repetition can be controlled by counter control loop, meaning that when we know how many times we want it to be repeated. We can also use Sentinel control loop, where we define one value as the exit value, and we can also use flag control loop, where we use Boolean.